By the end of the series, Deku has 7 quirks. But why? All Might was the greatest hero in the world with just the one, and Deku could have been too. The problem is that Deku as a character is not as analytical as we're initially led to believe. Deku is portrayed as extremely intellectual and very knowledgeable about quirks. He cataloged and indexed all the known hero and villain quirks and studied them incessantly. In fact, he was supposed to be so knowledgeable in this field that he initially planned on getting into UA on the merit of his intellectual prowess and hero knowledge alone. With that said, after acquiring One For All, Deku does nothing but prove that he's bordering mentally inept. I don't care that he's a crybaby. In fact, I kinda like it. It makes him feel far more human than most shonen MCs. And my issue with him has nothing to do with the fact that he was weak and his body wasn't strong enough to handle the quirk. My problem is that for someone who studied One For All night and day, he didn't think very hard about how he could use it. So let's start where I think a rational person with a functioning brain would start. Damage mitigation. Deku's first use of One For All breaks both of his legs and his right arm. I don't know about you guys, but personally, I would be immediately thinking of every way possible to make sure that never happened again. And that might take some engineering, but it wouldn't be rocket science. My first instinct would utilize technology that most of us use daily: shock absorbers. Specifically industrial grade shock absorbers. Truthfully, I don't think that these would save Deku in every instance, but they would definitely give him a buffer, and when something like this can be the difference between your bones turning into dust and a mild fracture, I think it's completely worth it. And that first thought is very closely related to some of Deku's earliest instructions as a UA student. Design a suit that is geared towards your quirk, preferably in a manner that assists you while doing hero work. Ironically, Bakugo does a really good job of this, especially since he's been at the top of the totem pole his whole life. He didn't actually need to change things up as desperately as Deku did. And Deku, however, does nothing, which is actually borderline infuriating considering all the things that he could have done. Again, Deku's first time using One For All, he jumps probably close to 200 feet or 65 meters in the air. He quickly realizes that he has no way to safely land, a problem that he could potentially face relatively frequently. Also one that he doesn't try to fix. All he would have to do is design a suit that had flaps, a wingsuit if you will. Then he would be able to land safely, glide long distances, survey large areas, engage in aerial combat, the list goes on. This modification is closely related to the next one that I had in mind, which would be webbed gloves. It's a simple fix, but it would allow Midoriya to slap the air and cause large gusts of wind. This would help his movement speed, but also his ranged and defensive capabilities. Deku could probably slap the air with enough force to create a small tornado, but this would also help him block projectiles or stop debris. He could clap and generate concussive blasts, and web gloves would help his swimming and gliding capabilities. Deku was surrounded by some of the best heroes being at UA. I don't know how he managed to get no inspiration from them. One of Deku's instructors was Present Mike, and Deku has this useless face mask on his suit. He could have made this face mask an amplifier and given himself Sonic Shout. But if you're smart in the way that Deku was supposed to be, you're already thinking about how this could go wrong. And don't worry, when I was thinking about this, I was right there with you. The larynx, for one, isn't made completely of muscle, and 2, is responsible for speech production. Being able to convey messages as a hero is extremely important, and this area would be particularly hard to heal. His tongue, however, that's a different story. The tongue is comprised entirely of muscle, and even though it also affects speech production, it would be much easier to heal. Part of what made Deku's arms an issue was healing the bone. Using the tongue removed some of that problem. I still wouldn't rely on this too heavily in the beginning, but the introduction of full cowling makes this viable far more frequently, especially with the assistance of a powerful amp.
I absolve you of your sins.
Nice.
Honestly, the list of things that Deku could have done with his quirk and his suit go on for days. And the potential of One For All was already really high before Deku got 7 extra quirks. When I started this series back in 2016, I remember thinking that what was going to set Deku apart from All Might was his analytical mind and knowledge of quirks. But in the end, it really just boiled down to him scaling way higher due to having way more abilities. And I will concede that by the end of the series, All For One and Shigaraki are pretty OP, and even Prime All Might probably wouldn't have been able to stop them. But the first 5 seasons of Deku were pretty hard to watch.